All right, guys. Time for another fake OG, fake charlatan video. I want to talk about the history of Street Fighter a little bit in this video too, but we're going to talk about these delusional Street Fighter Alpha 2 players, as I called them, cuckoo birds. And they prove they're cuckoo birds because, and I would encourage you, I'm going to show some messages here, but I would actually encourage you to go to the Alpha 2 Discord and see that these guys have no idea what they're fucking talking about. But we're going to show some specific examples here because if you do go and look at the Discord though, they say a bunch of things that I didn't even say in the video as arguments to what I said, which proves they didn't even watch the video. And when you have to lie about someone constantly, lie about things that they said, it proves you have no real argument, right? I mean, we have this one guy. He says he was banned from Fightcade for being too good. He's a tad bit delusional. We did show videos that I recently went on a 4-month win streak in Fightcade to the point that they made up lies to get me banned. That is true. We showed it. This is funny too. Mountain Dew KFKR. What Alpha 1 players should I be on the lookout for? YL, Young Legend. I know he's been mentioned. When he's on, so fun. Dude will kick my ass. This was a great quote, and you can read the whole quotes because Young Legend, a good player, and this isn't me trying to talk shit about him. Young Legend, you can look on Fightcade. The replays are there. I beat him in multiple sets the first time playing the game in years. But again, the whole can't admit that Clayton is the one that actually wins. We have players that we like that we say are the best. Yeah, I'm going to try him out in this game. Does that one dude that people don't like still play Alpha 1? Clayton, I believe his name was. I like how this guy, he's trying to do some kind of like, oh, who is that guy that we don't know, we don't like him, who thinks he's good at games? You mean the guy that is in my Twitter messages for years? Hey, dude, will you play on Fightcade again? Will you play me? Oh, hey, on Discord. Oh, yeah, I don't really... What's this guy's name again? Clayton? Oh, what was his name again? What's the guy that was considered the best at all these games? Blah, 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 that used to beat us all? I don't remember his name. Was it Clayton? Oh, yeah, you forgot that you're in my Twitter messages. Hey, Clayton, will you come back and play, please? I mean, that's pretty fucking ridiculous, right? Oh, and I like this too because all these guys, what I was trying to show here, and if you look at it this way, not all characters have the same button change, not from my experience. Like, I think Birdie can only do this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I think characters can only do this, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? This is the funny thing when I talk about. These guys who think that I don't know what I'm talking about Alpha 2, and they say that I'm cuckoo for Alpha 1, which is funny because if you watch it in my videos, I say I don't think Alpha 1 is the best game ever. I constantly also talk shit about Alpha 1 where it is necessary. Okay? There's no rose-colored glasses for me in terms of video games. All video games have their good and their bad. These guys literally, oh, he's so cuckoo for Alpha 1. We know how it works. You guys literally have conversations that you don't even know how Alpha 1 works. Yet you are giving your opinion on it. Oh my God, chains in Alpha 1 are so hard. These are the guys that you want to believe know what they're talking about in video games when literally in conversations they're talking about, how does this game work again? Blah, blah, blah. I'm the expert on all these games, not Clayton. We don't even watch Clayton's videos because we don't want to like get proven wrong. So when I talk about rose-colored glasses and, fake OGs, this is what people don't get about Alpha 2. Alpha 2 was not a popular game when it came out, okay? I know I look younger. A lot of people say I look younger than I am. I am, unfortunately, in my 30s. It sucks. Unfortunately, I am in my 30s now. I remember Street Fighter 2 at the arcade, okay? You guys have no idea how popular the original Street Fighter 2 was. The original Street Fighter 2, you could go to a store. It wasn't even just arcades. You know how they have like at the mall, like a kiosk or something, or at a video game store. I think you could call it a kiosk, where you can play video games or whatever for free. There were lines waiting outside of like a Sears or a Jason. I don't know, is Sears even around anymore? Or like I don't even know if Sears even around anymore. Point is, one of these big stores where you could play just Street Fighter 2 for Super Nintendo. There was lines going outside of the store to play Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 was one of the biggest video games ever. And this is going to be a very roundabout, but you're going to see what I'm talking about, right? That's how big Street Fighter 2 was. lines just to play the Super Nintendo version of the game of it, right? It was one of the biggest video games ever of all time, not just fighting games, okay? Alpha 2, nobody played. I'm sorry. Alpha 2 was dead. Believe it or not, and again, I'm going to say it again, and people are going to say I'm going to say something that I didn't say. Alpha 1 and all its clusterfuckery, not saying it's the greatest game ever, people still played Alpha 1 at the arcade. When I used to go to the arcade, people were still playing Alpha 1. Of course, Alpha 1 wasn't like, Street Fighter 2 popularity. But again, what I'm getting at here is by the time Alpha 2 came out, nobody played Alpha 2. People hated Alpha 2, okay? Not saying people were all magically in love with Street Fighter Alpha 1. Of course not. But when you went to the arcade, people were still actually playing Alpha 1, believe it or not. By the time Alpha 2 came out, it was just dead. People hated the game. And by that time, too, we had games like X-Men vs. Street Fighter. So it's like, man, people weren't even super horny about that game. But they're like, oh, fuck, I could play that. And they're like, Alpha 2, they're like, fuck, I could just play Street Fighter. A lot of times when I was young, you play like Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, or like Super Turbo or Alpha 1. When those games were all around, that's generally what people played, actually. People did not like Alpha 2. Alpha 2, as I said, Alpha 2 was a game where a very cool game, had a cool vibe, cool backgrounds, cool music, and you're like, wow. But then nobody actually wanted to play it. Nobody actually liked it, okay? This is another kind of fake OG thing that I'm going to talk about too. People got to realize, and I want you to think about this. This is like a fairy tale that people, I think of. A lot of times they talk about that Battle of the Bay, whatever. Basically the biggest tournaments in America. And you can see Choi versus, Valle and all that kind of stuff, right? And I think people that are not actually around at the time, or people that maybe were around at the time, and they have this kind of fake delusional rose-colored glasses, whatever, you know what I mean, for the series. People don't realize that, like, wow, people are like, oh my God, they actually videotaped this. This must have been a real big thing. Street Fighter 2 was obviously bigger. Where are all the people video cameraing, you know what I mean, Street Fighter 2, all these Street Fighter 2 tournaments? Where's all these videos of guys like Watts and, you know what I mean? It's very, very scarce. You know what I mean? All these other, like, super famous guys like Tomo and stuff. Do you want to know what it is? Guess what? Because even many, many years after Alpha 2, where are all these tournaments of Street Fighter 3 on VHS, CVS 1 on VHS, whatever it might be, Alpha 3 on VHS? It's very, very sporadic because guess what? It was old. It was a long time ago. People didn't actually have camcorders to record all this. It wasn't like that, oh my God, this is just the greatest tournament ever. Alpha 2 was the greatest game. Not everyone had camcorders to actually record all this stuff. It was very rare. Even early 2000s, how many videos of there are early 2000s? It just was not normal to regularly tape stuff. It was not that Alpha 2 was the most greatest game ever. You know what I mean? It just was rare to actually have footage of anything. Just serendipitously, we have some footage of Alpha 2. It was not like Alpha 2 was the most amazing. People loved it. That's why it was the only game that was taped. Guess what? It was just a long time ago. People did not regularly tape shit. Alpha 2 for the biggest game ever, that Battle of the Bay. Can someone go back and look how many people were at that tournament that people want to act like was the most amazing Street Fighter 2 tournament ever? Not many. Because Street Fighter was dead. People in general did not like Alpha 2 unless you just were hardcore still into fighting games. People, believe it or not, played more Alpha 1 in the arcades than they were playing Alpha 2 when I was a kid. Alpha 2 was not this amazingly popular game. That's a fucking fairy tale, dude. I saw some of the quotes, people are being like, oh, Clayton's talking about Alpha 2, and he's only using the first 30 years of it, the 90s to the 2000s to the 2010s. But everyone thinks about the game differently now. It's 2022. You mean the last year and a half now, Alpha 2 is a totally different game than it was for 30 years beforehand or 20 years beforehand? We can watch the footage. We can see, no, the game is not magically different. The same problems that the game had when it came out, the same problems that people complained about why they didn't like it before are still the same problems. The game has not evolved this past 25 years into being something super crazy that it was not in the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s. Okay? What are you talking about? We talk about these like rose-colored glasses. Sometimes a game just gets played more because it's the last in the series. There's a lot of people that like Hyper Fighting more than Super Turbo. But guess what gets normally played? Super Turbo, because it's the last in the series. We talk about, Street Fighter 3. Some people actually say they like Second Impact more. But guess what? People play Third Strike because it was the last in the series. People talk about Alpha 2. Well, you know what? Alpha 3 is such a radically different Street Fighter game than any of the other Alphas. It's like not even the same comparison. Alpha 2, in a sense, is kind of the end of that kind of like idea of the game. It's its own kind of standalone thing. That's why it has this kind of specific niche, right? Just talking about, these fucking fake OGs who talk about what it was like back in the day. Like, things were, were you even actually around? We can see that you're talking about Alpha 1. You don't even know you're talking about Alpha 1. First of all, like, I've said stories too. Alpha 1 was funny because, again, and people are going to say I'm saying it's the greatest game ever, which I'm not. It's a clusterfuck of a game, right? I've never said Alpha 1 is the greatest game ever. People are mad that I beat them in it. Like I said, I remember back in the day, long after I'd quit playing, video games and tournaments because of my health, randomly GGPO came on, and it was it Supercade? Was it Supercade? Someone, I don't remember. Was it Supercade, whatever, that actually had rankings? And then it was GGPO and Supercade. I'm sure you guys know. Anyway. I remember all these guys that were so OG talking on Shoryuken.com, right? Oh, about how Alpha 1 works, whatever. And I would see them in the GGPO, and they'd be playing Alpha 1. And I would go in, and they would be talking. I'd be like, dude, this game doesn't work like this. I'll show you. And I would play these masters of Street Fighter Alpha 1, Street Fighter Alpha 2, Super Turbo. I would destroy these guys. And you know what, guys, what they would say after that? Like, oh, what the fuck? Why do you know how to play this game? You actually know how to play? What's wrong with you? Everyone would leave. You know what I mean? Such fake charlatans. And some people are very fucking naive. You know what I mean? Very, God, what's the English word? Very kind of, oh, fuck, dude. Why do I try to speak so many? I was actually trying to speak Arabic earlier. Fuck, man. Why was I, people try to speak, impressionable. Some people are so very impressionable and naive to actually look this shit up, dude, to see what actually has gone on. Like, and I've never been a super impressionable person. Like, I even remember as a kid, dude, hockey night in Canada, all this kind of stuff. And everyone hated the Russian players. And even as a kid, I was like, why do I want to hate the Russian players? Right? I even think about that as a kid, like hockey night in Canada all the time. And then maybe there was a little bit because I remember the Sharks, San Jose, California stuff. And I'm like, man, who are these Russian guys that they're just so quiet? They're not super flashy. You know what I mean? Like all these Canada guys, everyone Canada, oh, rock'em, sock'em, hockey, Don Sherry. Not saying that fighting doesn't need to be in hockey. I don't even know if you're allowed to fight in hockey anymore. It's been so long since I've watched, right? I'm not saying you shouldn't be allowed to fight in hockey. But you know what I mean? You always saw these Russian players, and they just had this, like, Makarov and Larionov and all this kind of stuff, and they just had this smooth style. And everyone wanted, Russians are evil. And even as a kid, I'm like, man, I don't hate these guys. I don't hate these guys, dude, right? But some people are so impressionable, they'll probably read this stuff, and they'll read one comment, it's like, oh, man, that's how Alpha 2 was. Dude, Alpha 2 is almost like people forget, and I've talked about this stuff in these game theory videos and history of, like, fighting games so much. Like, dude, Alpha 2, a lot of people don't even like Super Turbo. I've talked about the narrative of video games and that kind of almost clash of ideologies that was happening at the time of Super Turbo that made it such a narratively interesting game, because you had that kind of clash of ideologies of like the more traditional old school player who liked, you know what I mean, the very kind of simple things having a drastic influence on the match. The whole idea of narrative of why Super Turbo was such a successful game, because you had a simple character. There was a narrative like Sagat, the Fireball Dragon Punch trap, so powerful. But then you had, you know, fighting games were progressing, and you had a character like Balrog rushing you down, and supers and throw loops. Not that throw loops weren't in old school Street Fighter, but supers, that kind of stuff. And a lot of old school players did not even like the ideas of supers, right? But it made for a great story while you watch it, that such powerful characters were such drastically different in the narrative and grand scheme of the game, right? It's amazing when you think about it. Like, again, these are deeper topics that these guys could never have. These motherfuckers could never have a conversation like this, right? But even Alpha 2, you know what I mean? Custom combos. It made a lot of these old school players are like, God, dude, this is exactly what we did not like about Super Turbo. That is Super having such a drastic influence on the match. And it felt so scrubby. I don't think we used the word scrubby back when I was a kid. I think that was more once games continue to go on. I don't remember using the term scrubby when I was a kid. That's probably an early 2000s, like late 90s maybe kind of thing. But maybe someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't recall us saying that when I was a kid. But, you know, Alpha 2, God, you know, do you want me to get real deep about Alpha 2? Because you can't even have a conversation with me on a basic level, right? Alpha 2 was not popular, dude. The only reason people were playing Alpha 2 is because they liked fighting games, so to speak. But people were trashing Alpha 2 for sure back in the day. There was a lot of, you know, very old school players that were like, well, fuck, man. They're like, Alpha 1 was already ghetto. You know what I mean? Super Turbo was getting ghetto with those supers. Like Alpha 1, people were already brilliant. I was like, I don't like this. But at least moves were still doing what they think they do. But then Alpha 2, they're like, oh, God, custom combos. And people are like, fuck this. Like, it just like people tell a fairy tale. And people are trying to act like, oh, no, Alpha 2 is super different than it was in the 90s, the 2000s. Some motherfuckers like Clayton thinks that Alpha 2 is still played like it was all during the 2010s. So you're telling me it was only during the past year and a half that Alpha 2 is completely different than it was for 25 years? Obviously, you can watch matches, and that's not fucking true. And everything that you say you know about Alpha 1, we can go back and look just like a week. What was just like about, it was just a couple days ago. You don't even know how Alpha 1 works just a couple days ago based on these messages. Is that not crazy? And you're telling me you're not a fucking OG, dude. You are not an OG. You were not around when these games were being played. You literally admit you don't even know how the game works, but you're telling me that Clayton doesn't know how any of these fighting games work. Clayton, the guy that has been predicting games for 20 years accurately, from Street Fighter games to Marvel games to anime games, all this kind of shit. You have no idea what you're talking about. It's fucking insane. Fuck me.